photographs sit quietly now, fading into sepia, their subjects frozen in time with eyes that seem to follow us from another world. They are the faces of women once whispered about in drawing rooms, admired from afar, and immortalized in early photographs that still survive a century later. Their beauty is haunting, not only because it has been preserved across decades, but because of the silent questions their images evoke. Who were they, beyond the stillness of the photograph? What dreams lived behind those steady gazes? And why, when we stare at them today, do we feel something more unsettling than admiration, something closer to dread? Imagine walking into an abandoned archive, the air heavy with dust and the faint scent of decaying paper. You pull open a drawer, and there, wrapped in brittle envelopes, are images of women whose elegance defies time. At first, they seem ordinary relics of history, but as you study them, you begin to notice the shadows. Not literal shadows, but something intangible, a heaviness clinging to their faces, as though each portrait carries a story never meant to be told aloud. These women were celebrated for their beauty, yet behind their luminous expressions lurked fates that history has done its best to conceal. This is not just a story about photographs. It is a story about what beauty meant in a world darker and harsher than we often imagine. A century ago, to be called the most beautiful was not only a blessing, it was a curse. Beauty became a trap, a cage, a target. And for many of these women, their names were lost while their images endured, leaving us to wonder whether the admiration of millions was worth the private torment they endured in silence. The early 1900s were unforgiving. Their portraits were often commissioned by wealthy patrons or created in ornate studios, bathed in soft light that smoothed their features into something almost angelic. But outside the photograph, reality was rarely so kind. A woman admired for her beauty could be paraded in social circles, only to be discarded when her youth began to fade. Some were thrust into marriages where their beauty became a commodity. Others were performers, singers, or actresses, their public adoration masking the loneliness and exploitation behind closed doors. And still others became symbols, idealized images used to sell dreams, perfumes, or even ideologies, while their actual lives remained forgotten in the margins. The unsettling truth is this: every photograph from that era holds more than a face. It holds silence, it holds secrets, and sometimes, if you look long enough, it feels as if those secrets are pressing against the frame, desperate to be heard. Take one nameless woman whose portrait rests in a forgotten museum collection. She sits stiffly, her hands folded, her hair carefully arranged. Her beauty is undeniable, but there is a flicker of something else in her expression, a tension that breaks through the calm pose. For decades, her photo was passed from one archive to another, admired but never questioned. Then, a letter surfaced, linking her name to an obituary written too soon. She had died at just 24. The reason was never made clear, only whispered about in hushed tones of illness and fragility. But as we study her photo today, the truth feels nearer. The brightness in her eyes is not joy, it is a farewell. There is something deeply uncanny about these preserved faces. Unlike the glamorous photographs we see today, edited and filtered into perfection, these old images were raw, slow exposures that captured every line of tension, every fleeting doubt, Their beauty is real, but so is their sorrow, and that combination creates an unease we cannot quite name. Consider the lives of women thrust into the public eye, their images appearing on postcards or in newspapers of the 1920s. At first, the photographs were flattering, carefully staged, meant to highlight the purity or elegance of their subjects. But beauty was rarely left alone. It was dissected, gossiped about, commodified. These women became brands long before branding existed. Their likeness used to sell ideals of femininity that bore little resemblance to the lives they actually lived. And in time, the weight of those expectations grew unbearable. One actress, celebrated for her delicate features, was adored by audiences who flocked to see her on stage. Her photo was reproduced countless times, cherished by strangers who never knew her beyond the printed image. Yet behind closed doors, she kept journals describing her exhaustion, the endless rehearsals, the scrutiny of critics, the whispers of scandal that followed her everywhere. She wrote that she longed to disappear, to retreat into anonymity where she could simply exist without being observed. Her final entry ends with a chilling line: "Perhaps one day my photograph will live longer than I do." And it did. When we look at her portrait today, we see what her admirers once saw: beauty, elegance, a faint smile that feels both inviting and distant. But when paired with her words, the smile warps into something tragic, almost unbearable. We are reminded that photographs preserve faces, not truths. They hide as much as they reveal. We often talk about photographs as windows into the past, but these photos of beautiful women from 100 years ago feel more like mirrors, showing us not only who they were, but how fragile our own notions of beauty and adoration truly are. The women in these images lived in a time of wars, of economic crashes, of epidemics, and uncertainty. And yet, for the brief moment the shutter clicked, they were elevated as something eternal. Perhaps that is why the images still grip us. They are proof that beauty is not timeless. It is fleeting, and when captured on film, it becomes a ghost. And maybe that is why you feel it too, that slight unease when looking into their eyes. It is not just admiration you feel, it is the echo of something they carried, something heavy, something that refuses to stay buried. When we explore these photographs, we are not just admiring faces, we are trespassing into private lives. We are brushing against untold tragedies. We are waking memories that have lain dormant for decades and perhaps should have remained so. The deeper you study these women, the stranger the feeling becomes. It is as though they know we are here, staring across a century. Their eyes hold ours too intently. Their silence feels almost deliberate, as if they are withholding something, and perhaps they are. Perhaps what unsettles us most is the possibility that beauty alone is not what survives, but sorrow. The camera captured not just their faces, but their burdens. And now, whether we want to or not, we inherit them. If you're still here with me, staring into the abyss of these century old gazes, then you understand why we must tread carefully. These stories matter, and they must be told with reverence, because behind each photograph lies a woman who once breathed, who once dreamed, and who may have left this world far too soon. And before we continue deeper into these haunting histories, I ask you to join me. Subscribe so that together we can keep uncovering the forgotten truths, the shadows of history, and the silent stories that too often remain untold. because only by remembering them do we give them a voice, a chance to step out of the darkness of time. But know this, the deeper we go, the heavier it becomes. We will learn of the women who were idolized only to vanish mysteriously from records. We will uncover the ones whose final years were steeped in sorrow, despite their faces being hailed as perfection. And as we continue, their eyes will follow us, closer, closer, until it feels as though they are whispering directly into our ears. Some photographs are windows, these are doors, and once opened, they cannot be closed again. The deeper we move into the shadows of these photographs, the more oppressive the silence becomes. It is no longer just an act of looking, it feels like an intrusion. Each woman's gaze lingers upon us like a secret she cannot voice, daring us to interpret the truth she carried. We began this journey thinking of beauty preserved through time, but what we discover instead is beauty haunted by sorrow, beauty bound in chains, beauty that whispers of forgotten tragedies hidden beneath the surface. The unsettling power of these images lies not in what they show, but in what they withhold. Photographs preserve a face, a moment, a performance of stillness. They never preserve the tremors of the voice, the weight of unspoken fears, or the realities of the days that followed. Yet, somehow, when you stare long enough into the eyes of these women, the silence becomes heavy with suggestion. They seem to know what history refuses to say. Take, for instance, a portrait discovered in an attic in London. A young woman in a delicate lace gown, her expression caught somewhere between serenity and unease. For decades, her name was lost. Only later was she identified as a minor stage actress whose beauty had once been praised in newspapers. Though her career never flourished, the details of her life have slipped away almost entirely, except for one chilling record, a brief note in an old ledger describing her as gone before her time. That phrase is all we have. Gone before her time. What was it that claimed her? Illness? Despair? A cruel twist of fate? We will never know. Yet the photograph remains, staring at us as if we should. The tragedy of these women is not only that their beauty was so fleeting, but that it was used, consumed, and then discarded, leaving only images behind. Their lives became footnotes, their faces transformed into ornaments, their humanity was erased by the very thing that preserved their memory. When we look at them today, we do not see who they truly were. We see what the world demanded of them. That realization alone is haunting enough. And yet, some faces resist even this reduction. Some photographs seem to contain too much presence, as though the subject refused to be erased, even by time. One such image comes from America in the 1910s, a photograph of a woman whose striking features were said to draw crowds wherever she went. She worked briefly in the burgeoning film industry, though few of her films survive. In her eyes, there is a piercing defiance, a refusal to be diminished. But defiance is not always protection. Her life, too, ended in obscurity. Her name faded, her roles forgotten, her existence reduced to whispers in archives. Only her portrait remains, holding onto us with an intensity that borders on the unsettling. It is easy to assume that photographs are passive records, that they only capture and preserve. But with these women, the photographs feel almost alive. They watch us, they confront us, they remind us that beauty may grant remembrance, but it does not guarantee peace. And the more you study them, the more you realize that beauty itself can be a curse. To be adored by strangers is to be claimed by them, transformed into something less than human. Many of these women lived in times when opportunities were limited, when a beautiful face was often both a passport and a prison. Some were thrust onto stages and screens against their will, pressured by families, patrons, or the sheer weight of society's gaze. Others tried to retreat into anonymity only to be dragged back into the spotlight, their likeness replicated endlessly without their consent. Imagine the exhaustion of being admired and misunderstood at once, of living in a world where your reflection mattered more than your soul. When you hold one of these photographs in your hands, or even just study it on a glowing screen, it is impossible not to feel the tension. The images are lovely, yes, but the longer you linger, the more oppressive the atmosphere becomes. Their beauty is not comforting, it is unsettling, because it is the beauty of lives suspended, silenced, preserved only in fragments. And yet, perhaps that is why they continue to grip us, not because we celebrate them, but because we sense their unease. Beauty, after all, is never just light. It is also shadow. It is also fragility. It is also loss. The photographs remind us of our own impermanence. Think about it. 100 years ago, these women were the living, breathing present. They walked through bustling cities, laughed with friends, touched the world around them. And now they are ghosts, faces without voices, lives reduced to mystery. If time could erase them so completely, what will it do to us? Perhaps that is why their images feel so haunting, because in them we glimpse our own future. When the shutter closed on their photographs, none of these women could have imagined how far into the future their faces would travel. None could have known that a century later, strangers across oceans would be staring at them, searching for meaning in their eyes. Perhaps that is the most chilling part of all, the idea that in some distant future, our own faces, captured on film or in pixels, will outlast our stories, that others will look upon us with the same uneasy mixture of curiosity and dread. It is here that the silence of these photographs deepens. They are not only stories of the past, they are warnings. They remind us that beauty fades, names vanish, lives are forgotten, but the image remains. And what the image carries is not truth, but a shadow of it, distorted by the weight of absence. The question we are left with is not whether these women were beautiful. That is obvious. The question is what that beauty cost them, what weight it carried, what secrets it buried, and in the end, whether their photographs are tributes or tombstones. Perhaps as we stare into their eyes, we begin to sense the answer. These faces are not smiling at us. They are not inviting us in. They are warning us. They are telling us that admiration is not the same as understanding, that remembrance is not the same as peace, and that sometimes beauty itself can become a haunting. So let me leave you with this. The next time you encounter an old photograph, perhaps tucked into a family album, perhaps hanging forgotten on the wall of an antique shop, pause, look closely, look longer than comfort allows, because behind the stillness of every face lies a story, a sorrow, a silence too heavy for words. And if you listen carefully enough, you may hear what history refused to say. The women of these century old photographs remain with us not because we remember their names, but because their presence refuses to die. Their beauty haunts us because it is not simply beauty, it is a reminder of everything that vanishes, of everything we lose, and of the eternal silence that waits for us all. They remain, century after century, eyes fixed upon us, whispering silently that all beauty carries shadows, and perhaps, when we least expect it, we too will be reduced to images, our secrets pressed forever into silence, our gazes frozen for future strangers to decipher. And so, I ask you, when you look at these photographs, what do you see? Do you see beauty? Do you see sorrow? Or do you see yourself reflected in their ghostly eyes, knowing that one day you too will linger only as a memory, a photograph, a whisper in the silence of time? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you felt while gazing into the eyes of these women from a century ago, because perhaps, in speaking of them, in remembering them, we can give them back the one thing they were denied, a voice that refuses to fade.